can use the cursor to point to things and go back and forth easier.
Yeah, I mean, we're going over things like, there's the site inventory and, the RENA numbers, and I feel like it might be just a little bit easier for people if I can point things out.
And I see Kenneth has joined us. He's our new planning commissioner that's joining us today. Welcome, Kenneth.
Hey, everyone.
Hi there.
Hi, welcome.
We're all just joining a little early to work out any of the bugs.
Okay.
Am I the only one hearing an echo?
Yeah, I don't hear it.
I don't hear one either.
I heard it for a bit, but I don't hear it now.
I think it's better. Thank you.
I do hear it. Sounds like some children in the background too.
Paul, are those your grandkids?
Yeah, I apologize.
I like the chatter. It breaks up the silence.
Yeah, but this goes 24/7.
Mm.
Are they real disruptive? Because I can try to find some other place in the house to.
No, that's fine. If you feel that it's getting loud, you can just mute yourself.
Mute my, I'll mute. Yeah.
How we doing, Scott? How we doing?
Good, Larry. How are you?
Wonderful.
Great.
Arlinda, I'm going to start the interpretation services now, okay?
Thanks, Melissa.
Hi, good evening, Mayor Jones. Would you like to also provide some feedback during the meeting? We have your video that'll play. Oh, you're muted. I'm sorry.
Unmute. There we go. Yeah, no, I just wanted to be present for Mr. Huber and for the swearing in ceremonies, of course, for the new planning commissioners. So just here in support.
Okay.
But thank you for asking. So I will turn everything off.
All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Can we turn my stuff off? Because they get sworn in. I'm done. Let me turn it
I've
off.
never worried about anybody fudging them.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll be in here until.
Actually, so since the meeting hasn't started yet, Mr. Kenneth Cook Askins, I see you and just want to congratulate you personally.
evening.
It's good to see you.
Mayor, thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely. Glad to see you here.
Likewise.
You'll do very well.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's Cook Ashton.
Commissioner Huber, is there a chance we could get a light on next to your face?
Oh, you know.
We're missing out on a good close-up of you.
Okay. There, how's that?
That's great, thanks.
It's the room. We got a lot of light in the back.
You don't need a picture of this ugly face. Oh, that's worse.
No, that's what.
I'm hoping to catch a tear dripping down your cheek.
That you won't get tonight.
All right.
Yeah, corners, that's what the guys do.
Yeah.
Set up backgrounds. Where you gonna put it in? Bring that out some. Bring the whole. Oh, that's better light. Oh. Yeah, we have just a study session. There's no items.
Oh.
Public hearing, item general plan update, public workshop. Public hearing. Up here, special order of the day to recognize plan commission. Hmm? The matter. I gotta give the invocation.
Just grab it.
Melissa? I don't think she can hear me.
Yes.
Oh, we're going to ask for the meeting passcode, but I think we just got it. So
Oh, okay.
no problem.
You guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. How's everyone doing?
How are you doing?
I'm good.
Good.
How you doing today, Commissioner Harriman?
Hey, Larry.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful.
How's life treating you?
Wonderful.
That's good.
I got my first Covina shot.
You
COVID
did?
shot.
When?
Yeah, I did.
Where at?
I got it 9 days ago.
Where'd you go?
Hesperia Health Center.
Okay. Are they taking any? Do you just make appointment and anybody can go?
You go on sbcovid19.com and then go to vaccinations and then check out what appointments are available.
Okay.
I got the Pfizer.
sbcovid.com.
sbcovid19.com. It'll pop up and
Okay.
you'll see it. And then you go to vaccines, and then you scroll down. They list different places. The top ones are San Bernardino. The next ones are Ontario, and then Hesperia is down at the bottom.
Okay. Yeah, because my wife, we took her. I took her to San Bernardino. I think a week and a half ago. But they wouldn't let me. They wouldn't let me get a vaccine because they said I wasn't an essential. I wasn't an essential worker.
Okay, this SB site is for 65 and older.
Oh.
So, yeah, it filled up really fast, but now they're starting to take more.
Do they check your age?
I think we had to fill out a form, but did we show an ID?
Yeah,
No,
we showed ID.
we showed ID.
Yeah, we showed ID.
Yeah.
Oh.
So Paul, let me just chime in. So I'm not quite 65, but I just found out from Regional Center that I qualify as a healthcare worker because of my son. And so I'm wondering if you would as well.
Well, see, they let Lanita, because Lanita is actually on their roster as the care provider for Ashley, even though we both provide the care.
You should
And
be on the
so-
list as well, because my husband and I both are.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
I'm a,
You should be able to.
okay.
Yeah, and I'm going to sign off real quick, but hello, Mr. Harriman. Congratulations, Mr. Kurth. Hello,
Thanks.
everyone else, and Councilmember Becerra, and everyone else, a familiar name. So it should be a good meeting. Looking forward to supporting everyone. And now I'm signing off.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
How you doing, Rob?
Oh, I'm doing good. We still got a few more minutes before we start, Larry, if you need to go make a cocktail.
Yeah, I should. I should be drinking. My last meeting, huh? Congratulations, getting back on the console. Or
Thanks, Larry.
Plan commission, yeah. Yeah, I've done my time. I'm tired.
Yeah, you sure have.
I saw you outside your office this morning, Rob.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I went to that, I went to that, what's that little corner? It's like a corner cafe or, it's on the corner of Ridgecrest and, Bear Valley. It's a little, it's like a country kitchen. I mean, it's real good.
Down
Yeah.
home grill, down home grill.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, they have an awesome burrito. Those breakfast burritos are killer.
I'd like to say welcome to our soon-to-be new commissioner, Kenneth Cook Askins. Hello.
Hello there. Thank you.
Hey, when we going forward, how do you like to how's your name how would you like your name to be said? Is it Cook Askins Jr. or what do you? So you'll be Commissioner Cook Askins Jr. Is that what you prefer? Okay, sounds good. Hey, Bob. Oh. Bob's having an issue on his computer. I'm gonna run over there, and if IT wants to shoot over, there might be a problem.
Okay, I'll help out too.
It is 5 o'clock now. One of our commissioners is having some technical difficulties. We're just going to give a couple more minutes to fix that and to allow some additional people to join the meeting.
So how are you gonna get me out of here? Just say after I get recognized, then they're gonna swear in the new commissioner, so I'll have to leave.
Well.
Oh, well. But then I'll just hear it. I wanna watch.
Okay, I think we're all here. If we're ready, I'll go ahead and start the meeting. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Victorville Planning Commission Workshop, February 1st, 2021. I'll call this meeting to order. Can we have roll call, please?
Of course. Chair Kurth,
Here.
Vice Chair Marsh,
Here.
Commissioner Huber,
Here.
Commissioner Wells,
Sorry. Here.
thanks, Commissioner Wells. Commissioner Harriman,
Can I get your microphone?
There we
you
go. I'm here.
all right.
Thank you. Before we get started, may I please hear any special instructions for the audience at this time?
Sorry, just one moment. We're just working out a technical difficulty. We're trying interpretation services for the first time tonight. And so we're just ironing that out real quick.
Good. Thanks. Are they still working on it, Melissa?
Yeah, I think, Chair, we can start with the first half of our agenda, and then we can work into the translation piece, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine. So then we can go ahead and move on with the invocation and pledge of allegiance. If you'll all please stand as I lead the invocation, and then it'll be followed up by the pledge of allegiance by Commissioner Huber. Lord, we thank you for our good health and our freedoms, allowing us to come together tonight. We ask for your blessings over this general plan update process. Please guide the commission, the public, the consultants, and city staff as we work through this important project so that the end result provides a sound and solid roadmap for the future of our city. Amen.
Amen.
Face our great American flag. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Now we have a special presentation to recognize Planning Commissioner Larry Huber's service to the city of Victorville. After 30 years of service on the Victorville Planning Commission, we would like to take this time to honor our departing commissioner, Larry Huber. I would like to know, we had a couple projected guests that wanted to speak. Can we confirm that those guests are here?
But I know former Mayor Codwell, I saw he was on.
Okay. Well, let's, I think we have one of them here. So here to recognize Commissioner Larry Huber on his service as a commissioner, we will have one, maybe two former mayors that would like to say a few words. We can go ahead and start with former Mayor Terry Caldwell, if you're here, Terry.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I sure can.
Well, can you see me?
No.
No, we can't.
Well, I can see all of you. It's just as well probably you don't see me. Anyway,
okay.
First I want to thank the Planning Commission for thinking to invite those of us who had an opportunity to work with Larry all these years. I started my political career long before most of you were probably even born. And my first involvement was as a planning commissioner, a newly appointed planning commissioner back in the late 60s, early 70s. I can't remember exactly when. So I know how important this position is. And before I start saying nice things about my longtime friend Larry Huber, I want to apologize to those of you who had to work and labor in the vineyards with him, and especially the planning staff, because Larry came to that position already fully dedicated to advancing the city of Victorville. And I say that because when I appointed him to the Planning Commission 40 years ago or whatever it was, Larry Huber was already deeply involved with helping to build this city. He was a volunteer on just about everything that existed. He was a volunteer on the old Victorville Fire Protection District. He was active in the Kiwanis Club. He single-handedly every year organized and put on the city's Christmas parade. He had a softball team that raised money for needy people. And probably the biggest extravaganza in the city at the time, he single-handedly put on, along with the the club, the night on the Riviera. So when I appointed Larry to the Planning Commission, I should have realized that he was going to be a thorn in the side of his fellow commissioners and the staff. And the reason for that is that Larry always did his homework. He'd do site visits to make sure that he understood the topography and the relationship with other buildings and other property. He would come to the meetings having studied his agenda, having talked to neighbors and competing businesses. And if he didn't understand something, he had no reservations about saying so and putting the staff in particular on the spot to explain and justify. And I know, especially back in the days when John Maddock was our planning commissioner, and we might go out and have a beer or something afterward, John would always say, the minute Larry started to talk, he knew he was in trouble. But it was because Larry was so committed to helping build this community, to create jobs, to be a pro-growth commissioner, that he's largely put a footprint on where the city of Victorville is and how it got here. So I apologize to those of you who had to interface with Larry when he was in one of his inquisitive moods, but his heart has been in the city of Victorville, I think almost forever. Victorville incorporated in September of 1962. Larry was already here, already involved in multiple activities to help build this city. And so he's not a newcomer. He was not a newcomer to this process. And I just want to say to Larry how proud I am of his service to this community, and how proud I am that he was my appointee for all of those years. And to those of you who are going to be parting company with him, I'm quite confident that you haven't seen the last of Larry Huber. I think if there's a planning issue that he has an interest or a concern in, and he's uncertain or in disagreement, he'll be at your meetings. So I'd bet a lot of money that you haven't seen the last of Larry Huber. So Larry, as you step down from the political side, just know that there are a lot of citizens in this city who are very thankful for your service. And as the mayor emeritus of the city of Victorville, I want to tell you, Victorville would not be what it is today had you not taken the time to dedicate so much of your life and your abilities to make city of Victorville the key city of the high desert. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. If anybody else wants to correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not seeing former Mayor Jim Cox chime in yet. Anybody else seeing him? Okay, then we'll move ahead. And if he does come in there, if you could please interrupt me before we move on too far, I'd like to hear from him if he can make it. At this time, we'll now play a video from our current mayor, Deborah Jones.
Hi, Chair Kurth. I believe Melissa has that. She'll be in just a second.
Okay. Okay, while we're waiting, there's going to be a video from our current mayor, but After that, we were going to move on to any commissioner comments. So let's do that now. Do we have any of the commissioners that would like to have any comments or remarks for Larry Huber?
I'll start out on that. I want to say it has been such a pleasure during my short time so far that I have been with the commission. Larry brought out a lot of, when he would ask questions and bring out different points, made things much more clear and the answers that he was given. So it has been my pleasure as a planning commissioner along with him for the last couple of years to be by his side. So I want to say good luck to you and thank you for doing all the things that has been expressed that you have for the city of Victorville. Take care.
Thank you, Commissioner Wells. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Commissioner Marsh. I'd like to say to Larry, Commissioner Huber, thank you. It's been a pleasure working with you. You've been a mentor. I remember when I was first appointed to the commission, Larry was the first person that I met with. He invited me to lunch, and he gave me full scope of what the commission was all about, and kind of gave me the insight to what to expect and what to do, which I truly appreciate. So with his mentorship, he's made things a lot easier for me, and I do appreciate knowing him and his friendship. So I just want to say thanks, Larry, and good luck, and I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Harriman, your microphone is it's off.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to say I met Larry maybe 30 years ago, and it was doing business. He hired me to do a concrete job for him. And so I've known Larry all this time. We run into each other at the swap meet. I'd stop into his office and talk with him, shoot the breeze. All the older city council members and Larry have inspired me to be involved in my community, and I really do appreciate that. And I just wish the best to you, Larry, and I'm sure I'll see you around.
Thank you, Commissioner Harriman. Thank you.
So I think I've told Larry this before, but it was many years ago when I first started in commercial real estate. My very first commercial real estate transaction was a very small lease transaction to a small window tinting business. The location we found was just perfect. It had the great signage, visibility, little shop area. We signed the leases. The tenant and the landlord were very happy. And about a week later, I got a frantic call from the tenant and landlord saying, the zoning's not right. They can't get a business license. So that was my very first experience of learning about entitlements and what business licenses meant. And I was pretty freaked out and kind of upset, and no one was happy with me, and I had to get this thing figured out and unwound. And someone had said, well, why don't you call Larry Huber? He's on the planning commission. He can maybe kind of explain some of this process to you. And so I did. And Larry took a lot of time with me explaining what that really means, what I'll be going through, why we do it, what the public hearing is going to be all about. And, that gave me a comfort level in it. And it really helped me helped me out quite a bit, and came time for the public hearing, and it was much smoother, and I understood a lot more. Right after that, Joanne Ullman, the former council member, brought me, had a meeting with me and appointed me then to the Victorville Planning Commission, because I had found somewhat of an interest, believe it or not, in land use and zoning, going through that process and that public hearing, the things that Larry helped kind of explain to me. So I became a planning commissioner, and I've had the honor to sit alongside Larry Huber and work alongside him on this commission off and on for almost 20 years. And it's been a pleasure and an honor. Thanks for your service. Thanks for everything, Larry.
Thank you, Commissioner Kurth. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, Chair Kurtz, so I do have what looks like Councilmember Becerra raising her hand to speak.
Please.
Councilmember Becerra, the floor is yours.
Liz, thank you very much for working with me. In the 34 years I worked with the city, you and I worked together almost every year. I appreciated everything you taught me, everything we did together, of the parades and everything. And you giving me, to go and run and everything. And I appreciate that, sir. Thank you very much. And we'll be seeing each other.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you.
Do we have anyone else wanting to speak, or do we have the video ready?
I have the video ready. If anyone else would like to speak, please raise your hand. I don't see. I know Jim Cox was supposed to jump on and say a few words, but with that being said, I'll start the video.
Larry, on behalf of the service to the city of Victorville. Victorville hit the jackpot when the U.S. Air Force assigned you to George Air Force, because you stayed and dedicated the next 59 years of your life to serving our community. During your 30 years as a Victorville Planning Commissioner, you saw our population more than double, our infrastructure mature, and our economy thrive. All the while, you aided our city with important planning decisions and promoted a pro-business environment. And you forged a lasting positive imprint on Victorville through your generous community service as a volunteer firefighter, an elk, a member of the Kiwanis, and a United Way volunteer, well, and then much, much more. We're grateful for your tremendous legacy of service.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we'll turn it over to you, Larry, for any final comments you may have for us.
Well, Terry kind of said it all. Been involved with the fire department for 30 years, the Christmas parade for 20 years, and the Planning Commission. I've been very, very happy with the city of Victorville, and I really loved to do everything I did for them. And it was great. It was fun. The time I had, things have changed in the last 30 years. The Planning Commission, most of us all went out and had a cocktail after the meetings. We would have meetings until 12 o'clock, sometimes 1 o'clock. We would meet 3 times a month sometimes. And it was exciting. We did more. We built this community. I remember the first 2-story that was on the Planning Commission item, and on and on. It was fun. We all got along great. No fighting going on. We just did our job. So again, I want to thank the Planning Commissioners and Mr. Caldwell for saying what he did. Even probably some of it's a lie, but I really appreciate it. Thanks again, commissioners and staff. Staff has always been just great. Answer questions. John Natick was super. He was really tough in his first years. He miled down a little bit, would kind of agree with the commissioner sometime, but he was tough. He was tough. So again, I really thank everybody that was involved all those years, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Larry. So then with that, at this time, we'll be swearing in new Commissioner Cook Askins Jr. and myself for another term. Here to administer the oath will be City Planner Scott Webb.
Thank you, Chairman Kurth, fellow commissioners. First, I'd like to say on behalf of staff, we'd like to thank Larry Huber for all of his 30 years of dedication. It's with great pleasure and honor that we just want to say thank you for all of his service. And despite what some may say, staff really did appreciate him throughout the years. We always liked his raw opinions and never holds back any punches. So thank you for your service, sir. And with that, I'd like to point out that Planning Commissioner Rob Kurth has been appointed by the City Council to serve another term as a Planning Commissioner, and I will administer his oath now. Rob, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Robert J. Kurth, do solemnly swear
I, Robert J. Kurth, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
Discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Rob.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Rob.
Thank you.
And with that, we have one more commissioner to swear in today. Kenneth Cook Askins Jr. has been appointed by the City Council to serve his first term as a planning commissioner, and I will administer his oath now. Kenneth, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Kenneth Maurice Cook Askins Jr., do solemnly swear
I, Kenneth Marcine Cook Askins Jr., do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
discharge the duties of the office of which I am about to enter.
Congratulations and welcome to the commission.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations, new commissioner. And hope that I can meet you in person soon.
Yes.
Hopefully sooner than later here. So thank you, Mr. Webb, for that. Can we update the roll call now, please?
Yes. Commissioner Kurth,
Here.
Commissioner Marsh,
Here.
Commissioner Wells,
Here.
Commissioner Cook Askins Jr.,
Here.
Commissioner Harriman.
Here.
All right, thank you. So now we are supposed to call for nominations for chair and vice chair. However, due to the fact that we have a brand new commissioner, number one, and also we have a fifth commissioner that is yet to be appointed, it might be best to continue this, the nominations for chair and vice to a future meeting. I would like to get the feeling of the commission if they're okay with that.
I'm not.
Okay.
I'd rather do it now.
Okay. Then,
yeah, that sounds good. I'm good for doing it now.
Okay, then we would look for a nomination for chair.
I move to nominate Rob Kurth, chairman of the Planning Commission.
I second.
All right.
All right, I would accept, and I thank you, and I'd be honored to continue on for a while.
Okay, let me take the vote real quick.
It may be appropriate to ask for any more nominations.
Okay, let's do that. Are there any other nominations for chair? Okay, I don't see any, so we can go to a vote, and thank you, Mr. Webb, for reminding me of that.
All right.
So we could take a vote now on chair.
I have a motion by Commissioner Harriman with a second by Commissioner Wells to select Commissioner Kurth for the chairman position. I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Kurth,
Aye.
Commissioner Marsh,
Aye.
Commissioner Wells,
Aye.
Commissioner Cook Askins Jr.,
Aye.
and Commissioner Harriman.
Aye.
Okay, and then now, are there any nominations for vice chair?
I nominate Commissioner Harriman for vice chair.
I second.
Okay, are there any other nominations for vice chair? Commissioner Harriman, are you accepting of the vice chair position?
I do accept.
Okay, can we have a vote, please?
I have a motion by Commissioner Marsh with a second by Commissioner Wells for Commissioner Harriman to have the vice chair position. I'll take a roll call vote. Chair Kurth,
Aye.
Commissioner Marsh,
Aye.
Commissioner Huber. Oh, excuse me. Commissioner Wells,
Aye.
Commissioner Cook Askin Jr.,
Aye.
and Commissioner Harriman.
Aye.
Okay, well, congratulations, Mr. Harriman.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, at this time, the Planning Commission would like to open the first public workshop on the proposed amendments to the city's general plan. I'd like to introduce Scott Webb, city planner from the city's planning department, who will lead off our discussion.
Thank you, Chairman Kurth, fellow commissioners. This is a public workshop, and I just want to welcome everyone and thank you all for joining us, taking the time out of your schedules to participate in this process. I'm pleased to introduce the city's first of many public workshops on the proposed general plan amendments and the sixth cycle housing element update. The general plan and the elements within the general plan are state mandated guiding documents that help shape the future development of our city. The state requires robust public outreach during the formation of these plans. Unfortunately, we did plan for the interpretation feature to be available today, and it was working before the meeting, but due to some technical difficulties, we will be providing an interpretation version in Spanish after the meeting that will be posted on our city website. So for those of you that are attending that are would like to have that translated, again, my apologies, but we will provide that after the meeting. At this time, I'd like to have Karam Ostrom, if you can just provide that quick direction in Spanish, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure, Scott, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hola, buenas tardes. Solo estaban anunciando para ustedes que están viendo la junta para y querían la versión en español. Desafortunadamente, el servicio que estábamos usando no está sirviendo apropiadamente a este momento. So la junta no va a estar transferida en español, pero lo que van a hacer es van a poner la junta en español después de que se acabe en nuestra website. So por favor, nomás chequeen nuestra website después cuando se acabe la junta. O si tiene preguntas, por favor, llámenos al Melissa, what's the phone number for planning?
It's 760-955-5135. Sorry.
Si tiene preguntas adicionales después o para agarrar la versión en español, por favor llame al 760-955-5135. Gracias. Back to you, Scott.
Thank you, Karam. And we hope to have that feature working at our forthcoming workshop. So before I introduce the consultant team, I'd like to mention that the city applied for and received state grant funding for this endeavor. With these grant funds, the city was able to obtain the services of Harris & Associates as the city's consultant. Harris & Associates has decades of technical expertise in developing comprehensive general plan updates for other cities. Hida Mosman is the senior director. She will be providing a presentation with support by Dima Galkin, which is the project manager. Also on the line, which will be translating the Spanish version that we'll post on our website, is Erlanda Martinez, the senior analyst. So with that, I'd like to hand it off to Hida Mosman to walk us through this first workshop.
Thank you, Scott. Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Commission and members of the public that are tuning in. I'm going to be sharing my screen to provide a presentation on the housing element and general plan updates. And I'm hoping everyone can see my screen at this point.
Yes, I can see.
Okay. Okay, good. That's always good. Unfortunately, even though we tested the translation feature on Zoom, for some reason it's not working. The technology was not cooperating with us this evening. This slide was instructions for any translation, anyone who wanted to tune in for that. So we apologize that isn't working well this evening. I'd like to start just giving an overview of the presentation this evening. We're going to be presenting sort of a general overview of all of the general plans that are currently underway. And then we're going to pause for questions, and then we'll have a second presentation that is more in depth on the housing element update, which is what actually triggered all of the remaining general plan updates. So just by our agenda, we're going to introduce you to the team working on the general plan updates. We're going to go over some information on how today's workshop, or tonight's workshop, I should say, is going to work and how people can participate. We're going to talk about what a general plan is, as you know, that it's not something that everyone is familiar with. We're also going to discuss each of the general plan updates at really high level, and those updates would be the housing, land use, safety, and environmental justice elements. As I said, we'll take questions at the end of the first presentation. And after that, we'll sort of embark on our presentation that's more specific to the housing element itself. So to be the primary team working on this endeavor is Scott Webb, city planner with the city of Victorville, myself, Hita Mosesman, and Dima Galkin at Harrison Associates. This sort of illustrates the way that the team is working on all of the all the general plan element updates. With the city, we have Scott Webb and Michael Zarzitsky in the planning department. Harris and Associates were a team of 3 different consulting firms, and we are handling the general plan updates. Myself and Dima Galkin are working on the housing element update. A firm called City Place Planning, Claudia Tedford and Patricia Blumen are working on the land use element update. With Harris is Eric Vaughn and Carolyn Ivelez. They're working on the safety and environmental justice updates. And then finally, also with Harris, Diane Sandman and Kristen Blackson are preparing the required environmental documentation. So just to start, the way to participate, this new world that we find ourselves in with Zoom, we thought that we'd lay out some methods of conducting this workshop. So I'm going to start with the first presentation, and we're going to mute the audience during the presentation, as sometimes questions can be answered by the slides in the presentation before we get to sort of the Q&A. If you do have a question and you want to just kind of jot it down as you're thinking of it, please feel free to type it into the chat box, and we'll be checking that at the end of the presentation. We'll try to answer those questions first, and then after that, you can raise your hand if you'd like to ask an additional question. If you click on the participants at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll be able to raise your hand to ask a question. And then we just ask that, we'll all be mindful of our background noises. Most of us are working from or at our homes right now. So to start, we want to start with the basics of this effort that we are embarking on, and talk about what a general plan is. The general plan is the primary community planning document. If you think about a general plan as a book, it has chapters, and those chapters are the elements that we'll be discussing this evening. The general plan is required by state law. Every city and county in the state has to have a general plan. And it really is a blueprint for a community's future development, sort of a long-term vision. It contains goals, policies, and actions. And there are many elements that are listed on the right-hand side of the slide. The ones in red are the ones that are currently being updated or prepared right now. And that would use housing, safety, justice element. Environmental justice element is new. It's required through a law change occurred in the last few years. The housing element update, which is required every 8 years, is the thing that triggered the need to do the land use and safety updates and then prepare the environmental justice element. There is a dedicated web page on the city's website, and we've provided the web address here at the bottom, and it provides information on all of the general plan updating. So as I said, the housing element update, it did trigger the remaining updates that we're working on. The housing element, again, every city and county in the state has to have one, and it has to be updated every 8 years to reflect what's going on at the present time. The purpose of the housing element is to plan for adequate housing for all residents, including all income levels. It does contain more specific information than other elements that tend to be a little bit general because this is a longer range plan. And it must be consistent with the other elements of the general plan, and most notably the land use element, because you have to have land that's zoned or dedicated for residential in order to meet your housing requirements. The public engagement process is currently kicked off now with this meeting this evening. We will have another meeting in March, and I'll be going over those specific dates later in the presentation. Again, there is a web page dedicated to the housing element update, and we encourage all residents, members of the public, businesses, stakeholders to complete a survey that we put together on both the housing element and the land use element to obtain input, your ideas and your thoughts about housing needs moving forward in Victorville over the next 8 years. The web address is provided here in the presentation. You can also access it on the web page dedicated to the housing element and the land use element. The next element that's being updated is the land use element. And basically it's a plan for where specific land uses will physically be in the city. And these are, all kinds of land uses: residential, commercial, industrial, open space, etc. The land use element really needs to reflect the community's vision for the future. And its purpose is to make sure that there is an equitable and accessible distribution of future land uses. Like the housing element, it needs to be consistent and interact with other elements of that general plan book that I had mentioned earlier. It itself has its own public engagement process. There will be planning commission workshops later this month. It will be the first one, and there'll be a second one in May. The land use element also has its own dedicated web page. And again, we have links to the survey that is for both the housing element and the land use element. And I wanted to say that we have them in both English and Spanish. We want to encourage as much input and as much participation as possible. Next is the safety element. The purpose of the safety element is to identify and reduce impacts from natural or man-made disasters. So here we're talking about unfortunate things like fires, floods, earthquakes, even climate change, and the presence of hazardous materials in communities, which most communities do have that. The goals and policies are to reduce the risk of these disasters, to prevent the disasters wherever possible, and make sure that the community is prepared as possible, with the goal of preventing and reducing death, injury, and property damage, as well as relocation, and to look and focus on emergency care and response in response to a potential hazard. Again, just like the housing element and the land use element, it does have its own public engagement process. There will be a safety committee formed. That is in process now. All of these elements, the amendments and updates to the general plan have just begun. So in this case, we would look to public safety personnel, the utility companies, parks and recreation, and education entities to be committee members to help advise on updating the safety element. Their meetings will be open to the public as well. So there'll be opportunities for input on that element, as with all the elements that we're discussing this evening. So what's new is the environmental justice element. There was a law passed a few years ago that made this a requirement for what's called disadvantaged communities, which are generally communities where there are lower incomes and there are some environmental issues as well. And the purpose of this element is to plan for the equitable distribution of public facilities and services to enhance the community's quality of life overall. So we're really talking about things like clean air, access to fresh food, safe and sanitary housing, which ties to the housing element, more access to public facilities, encouraging and access to physical activity, and promoting civic engagement. The environmental justice element does have its own public engagement process. There will be a community advisory council that will be formed, or a CAC. And the way to participate or to be a member of that CAC is to participate in a survey, which we have the links here, both in English and in Spanish. Again, you can either apply to be a member of this council, or you can provide your ideas and input. We envision the CAC meetings, the CAC to be formed by the end of this month or early March, and the meetings of the CAC will occur between March and May. And finally, all of the elements updates that we just walked through There's a requirement that an environmental assessment be prepared pursuant to California law. And this really, the environmental assessment is an analysis of potential physical impacts resulting from the changes in all of these different elements: housing, land use, safety, et cetera. And that'll be primarily in the form of an environmental impact report. So to provide as much information as possible, we've laid out here the basic schedules for each of the elements and when the documents and the public participation process will occur. The housing element's on a slightly faster track than the remaining elements just due to state requirements. The housing element needs to be approved by City Council and submitted to the Department of Housing and Community Development at the state by October 15th. So that sort of dictates our schedule. Right now, we're going through our public engagement process, and we envision that to be continuing throughout, but we're hoping to aggregate survey results by about March 15th. We anticipate a draft in mid-May and a final version in mid-August, with the doc going to Planning Commission and Council in September and October. The element, safety element, and environmental justice element are on a similar track in terms of the documents and the public engagement. The land use element has survey as well. It's combined with the housing element survey, and that is happening now. The safety element, environmental justice element have a committee and a council where those are being formed, and those meetings will occur through May. Drafts of all three elements are anticipated by July, with final versions in the late summer. And those documents will be going to Planning Commission and Council early next year. So again, to highlight the public engagement process as part of this and when these meetings will occur, because we really do want to encourage as much public input and participation as possible in this process. Because it's planning the long-term vision for the city. But the housing element workshops, we're having one this evening. We'll have another one on March 22nd. The land use element workshops will be February 24th and May 26th. The Environmental Justice Council will be meeting between March and May. It's currently being formed, and we're encouraging people to participate. We've had 3 meetings on the schedule total, and those meetings will be open to the public, and there'll be opportunities for participation and input. Similarly, the safety element committee would be formed between now and March, and we'll have 2 meetings during the process. And at this time, I'd like to pause for questions and comments.
Hi, Hida. Before we open it up to questions from people, I wanted to acknowledge and respond to a question we received in the chat. That question was, could the presentation be emailed to us? And we'll definitely make sure the presentation is uploaded to the city's website. And in the presentation, you'll see our email addresses. If anyone would like the presentation directly, feel free to email us and we will send it over to you.
And those email addresses will be at the end of our second presentation on the housing element, I'd like to say.
Okay, I'd like to ask our city staff, are you tracking, and do you see any anyone with hands up that would like to ask questions for the consultants at this point?
Commissioner, or excuse me, Chair Kurth, I'm not showing anyone raising their hand, and Dima answered the question we received in the chat.
Yep. And then are there any questions from commissioners at this point?
I have a question. Who's appointing the CACs?
Well, we're collecting names through the survey for those people that want to participate. And so the CAC will be determined by those who would like to participate.
So is there a vetting process of any type?
So ideally, it's not an absolute requirement, but ideally we'd like to have those people participate who have some experience with environmental issues or any of the environmental justice issues that we had mentioned with regard to clean air, access to fresh foods, promoting civic engagement, physical activity, and those things. That would be ideal.
Has you reached out to social media asking for people to apply? Because I haven't seen any. And I did take the survey myself.
I know that there have been some social media posts. I will defer to city staff to kind of talk more about that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and I could state that we haven't at this point reached out to the general public specific to this committee. We were hoping just by the involvement in these meetings and the people that take the time out to fill out the survey would be enough to gauge their participation, and from there we would form the committee. But at this point, we haven't reached out through social media for these specific advisory committees, and it is just focused primarily on that environmental justice. So they're mainly there to provide staff feedback, the commission feedback, so you have that information when we're developing the plan. So we hope to, at future meetings, be able to tell you who's applied, and we'll go from there. But it's still at the infancy stage.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Kurth. We received a question if we can highlight the dates again for the land use element adoption.
Would we be able to throw that slide back a couple slides?
Definitely. Let me just share that again.
Maybe they can take a quick snapshot picture of that or something.
Sure. Let me bring that up. Can everyone see that slide?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
So with the land use element, we're looking at a draft July, a final version in September, and then taking it to Planning Commission and Council in early 2022, January 2022.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, then if we've covered that portion, and if there's no more questions, then maybe
we do have some more questions. We have someone
ahead.
with a raised hand. The name is Steph Vida Paza, looks like, is what I can see.
Okay.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello. Hi.
Hi, it's Basarin. My name, Stephanie
Oh,
Vida.
Pazarin, sorry. My apologies.
Yeah, so I just have a few questions. So it sounds like you guys are still in the infancy stage. Will there be an opportunity to share some of the strategies and policies that the team is looking to adopt in regards to the various housing components? I was just thinking about the previous housing plan and how in the subsidized housing units, we've lost a little over 200 units. Since they've expired, they no longer have to be deemed affordable housing. And so I was just thinking, is that something that the team is looking to address to make sure that we're still meeting all of our RHNA numbers, and particularly our very low income housing requirements for folks?
And I can answer that question. In fact, it is required that we look at units that are at risk of expiring affordable, what's called covenants, meaning that the units have to stay affordable for a certain time period. So we will be looking at that and examining and doing an inventory of sort of what's affordable in the community at the present time, as well as looking at what the new requirements are in terms of affordable units moving forward. And I wanted to ask you to stay tuned for the housing element presentation that we'll do after this question and answer period, because we're going to actually lay out exactly what those numbers are, and how, in a general sense, how we're going to approach making sure that those units are planned for. But we really do welcome this type of input. And I encourage you to do the survey and to provide the input in the survey. And also you can reach out to any of us on the team, and also to participate in the March workshop as well.
I'd also like to answer, so we had another question in the chat, where can I find the survey? We'll have links to the survey in the presentation. They're also on the city's website. And if, again, you'll see our emails in the presentation. If you have any issues finding the survey, feel free to email us. We also have one of our, the people on our team who's working on the land use element, Claudia Tedford, is in this meeting, and I see she has her hand up. I'm guessing that means she wanted to add something. Claudia, are you there?
Yes, I'm sorry. That was a mistake. I apologize. I didn't mean to have my hand raised.
No worries, no worries. And then we just had a follow-up question in the chat. Thanks for the survey information. Is there a contact person? Hida and I would be the contact people for the consultant team, and you'll see, again, you'll see our email addresses at towards the end of the housing element presentation.
So, because, and I'd just like to say that because this question's come up, I'd like to quickly share my screen and then show you all the slide that has our contact information, so you don't have to necessarily wait. So if you see here, that is our contact information. So please feel free to contact either Dima or myself with any questions or comments or input.
And I would like to interject just real quickly for the audience that's listening along and may want to fill out the survey as they're listening along. The website at the bottom of this page is where you can access the links to the surveys. And I'd also like to point out for those that want to ask questions or have comments, you'll need to raise your hand. So if you're on an iPad or other device, it's usually under the More feature, and you can raise your hand there. Or if you're on a regular PC, you should see it on your screen.
And just to add to what Scott said, we do still have our interpreter in the meeting. So even though the technology didn't quite work, if someone has a question in Spanish, we are able to answer that. And I don't know if we can, Orlando, if you would like to translate that.
I'll make Arlanda a co-host right now.
Okay.
Can everyone hear me?
We can hear you.
Dice Dima que todavía tenemos servicios de interpretación disponibles si alguien tiene una pregunta en español. Desafortunadamente la tecnología no trabajó para poder tener, pero si necesitan, estamos disponibles.
Maybe we'll repeat that one more time just to.
Can everybody hear me now?
That's better.
That's better.
Perdón, dice Dima que pedimos disculpas porque la tecnología no trabajó, pero aún así estamos disponibles. Si tienen alguna pregunta en español, todavía podemos interpretar. Y como recordatorio, la presentación va a estar disponible en internet con el video. Gracias.
Hi, Orlando. If we just want to tell them in Spanish how they can comment by pressing the raise hand.
También están comunicando que si quieren hacer un comentario, tendrían que hacerlo por la aplicación de Zoom, y como lo van a hacer es dándole clic en participantes y hay una opción que dice levantar mano, en inglés es raise hand. y nos va a enseñar que ustedes quieren hacer una pregunta. Y así les daremos tiempo para poder hacer su comentario.
All right, is there any more questions? If you have questions, please send them through the chat or use the raise your hand function. Chair Kurth, I'm not showing any more raised hands or any additional comments through the chat.
Okay, thank you. I guess that means Mrs. Mosesman, are we heading into the housing portion of it now?
I think so, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. One moment while I get us back to the housing element. Okay. Alrighty. So I'll kick off our housing element update, more specific presentation now. The agenda for this presentation is to sort of explain what a housing element is. We're going to talk about something called a regional housing needs assessment, or RHNA for short, and what that is and why that's important. We're going to talk about a very important component of housing elements, which is called the preliminary site inventory, that identifies where housing for all income levels will be located specifically in the city. We'll talk again about ways to get involved in this process to provide input, and talk about next steps in terms of the schedule. And we will take questions at the end. So just sort of starting from the basics, what is a housing element? We talked about what elements are, like chapters in the general plan book. This is the primary planning document to address a city's housing needs. Again, every city and county in the state of California has to have a housing element. It addresses the housing needs of residents, as I said, of all income levels. So there are different sort of needs assessments and different in terms of the units by income level. The document is certified by the California State Department of Housing and Community. It's required to be certified. The city can't just prepare it. They have to send it to the state to be certified that it's all legal requirements. So what's in a housing element is actually pretty specific. It includes a lot of demographic information about who lives in the city, the population, how many people, what are the income levels, and what does employment look like. And then it also addresses what are the housing needs as we know them now, and what are the projected housing needs going into the future over the next 8 years. And it identifies opportunities in terms of sites and potential funding for affordable housing, and it also identifies some challenges as well. It contains goals and objectives, as well as programs and policies and actionable items to address and adequately plan for housing needs. And as I said, it contains what we call site inventory, which is basically a list of land in its specific location for where that future housing development is going to occur by income level. So why is this element being updated? And the short answer really is because the state requires it every 8 years. It needs to be updated because things change. There have been some updates in state laws in recent years, which requires more information in the housing elements and more specific information. It will show how the city will plan effectively and facilitate demand and growth moving forward over the 8 years. a city or county having a certified housing element allows them to be eligible for state funding, particularly for affordable housing. So that's very important. And the housing element update process allows for community involvement at regular intervals in the long-term planning process. So the process of getting the housing element updated and approved has a few steps to it. The first step we're starting tonight, which is the public involvement step. It's important that in addition to looking at census data and other types of information about the city of Victorville, we want to hear from the residents, community organizations, and stakeholders as to what the needs are and what current conditions are. We take all of the data and we take the input and we develop a draft housing element. The contents of it are prescribed by law, and so we follow that model. We have a draft that's available for public inspection, and it also is sent to the state for their review. And then we prepare a final based on input from the state and the public, and that is presented to Planning Commission and the City Council. After the council approves it, it's sent back to the state for eventual certification. And all certified means is that the state is officially saying that the housing element meets all of the state legal requirements. And again, the benefits of having a certified housing element is that the city is eligible for funding, particularly for affordable housing. And it really does demonstrate that the city is able to plan for the housing needs of the community. So now I wanted to touch on what's called the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, or RHNA. This is a technical term and it's in the law, and it's in a really important part of the housing element itself. So I sort of wanted to try to break it down into the most basic way that I possibly can. It basically, at the end of the day, is the number of housing units that the state says the city needs to plan for. That information actually comes from the state of California through a few steps of a process. The state does population projections, and it estimates by big region like Southern California, Northern California, Central California, how many housing units are needed in those general portions of the state. And specifically, they look at regional areas called association of government sort of areas. Where we are now, Victorville, all of Orange County, LA, San Bernardino, Riverside, and Ventura is in something called the SCAG region, or Southern California Association of Governments. The state gives these association of governments a number of housing units that they need to plan for as a region. That number for SCAG, this 8-year period, is 1.3 million units. It's a very large number. It's much larger than it has been in the past. So SCAG then develops a methodology of how to parcel out how many units each city within the larger region gets. And Victorville's share is 8,146 as determined by SCAG. So that's a larger number, but it's made up of component parts. And one of the very important parts of a housing element is planning for units at different income levels. And the state defines and the law defines several different income levels. So we have extremely low and very low, which are grouped into one category. And you can see that here on my screen. To the very left, we have the income categories. So we have extremely low, very low. This is, again, it's defined by law and it's looked at as on a countywide basis. So in San Bernardino County, a family of 4 that makes $37,000 a year or less is defined as an extremely low or very low income household. The city has to plan for 1,700 units that would be affordable to extremely low or very low income households. Low income in San Bernardino County is anywhere between $37,000 and $60,000 a year for a family of 4. Victorville has to plan for 1,100 of these units to be affordable to households in these income categories. Moderate income is $60,000 to $90,000 a year. This is gross income, combined income for the whole household. 1,500 units have to be planned for, and this is out of the larger number. And then above moderate income, which is $90,000 a year combined income, household income plus, that's 3,700 units. So as you can see, of that 8,146 units, 54% need to be made affordable to moderate income, low income, and very low, extremely low income households. So it's not just the big number, but the numbers within all of the income categories have to be planned for, and we have to actually identify sites where those units would be developed. Which leads me to the site inventory that I've mentioned a couple of times. This is a part of that RHNA, or Regional Housing Needs Assessment. It's a requirement. So we have to, in the housing element, we have to develop a spreadsheet that shows and identifies every site by address, or what's called assessor parcel number, which is the way counties identify property. If you have a tax bill, property tax bill, your assessor parcel number will be on that. So we identify the specific property. We have to identify the number of units that are going to go on that property that can be allowed to be built on that property. And then we have to identify what income level that particular project would serve. And the total of all of the units on this list of units has to total 8,146 units, but also has to be matching the unit counts for all of the income categories. So on our list, our site inventory list, all of the extremely low, very low sites that we've identified, the total of all those units has to total 1,731. So that is what the requirement is for the housing element. So it's very, very specific. There are also requirements for fair housing. And what that means is affordable projects can't only be in one or two areas of the city. They can't just be limited to that. They need to be spread throughout the city as much as possible. So that a lot of times requires a lot of cities to look at other pieces of land that may not even be residential right now to ensure that there is housing developed throughout the community at different affordability levels. So here we're going to show a few maps here of areas that this is our initial preliminary look at areas of the city that we could potentially have sites to include in our site inventory as part of the housing element. So here we're starting with Old Town, the Old Town area. It is zoned for residential, and in particular, higher density, meaning it's not single family. You can put multifamily units in this area. So this is a potential area where we would have sites, and we would be saying that housing would be built moving into the future. There's also the 7th Street corridor, which is primarily in red. You can see that there is a single family and some multifamily that surround this commercial area. Many cities are looking at either vacant or underutilized commercial properties with the advent of online shopping and COVID and sort of changes to the way people live and shop. Retail centers have become affected in some cases by changing preferences. So it's possible that this could be an area where we would identify sites for various income levels. The Civic Center area as well, and like the Old Town area, there's a specific plan here that allows for residential and higher density residential, meaning it's not single family. So this is a potential area that we can look at. South of Nisqually, this area, as you can see, is primarily single family homes in sort of the yellow shaded area. But if you look to the left of that, where we've shaded, well, we didn't, it's on the zoning map for the city, where it's shaded more of a red color. These are areas where there are vacant parcels, some commercial, very, very centrally located, sort of near commercial and not too far from the freeway that are potentials as well. And then the St. Mary Medical Campus, which is in the planning stages. We've identified it with the green arrow there. This is an area where residential development could potentially occur, even something like a senior housing development as well, given the project, the St. Mary's project. And then finally, the Walmart Supercenter sort of area. You can see that we've indicated it there. There's quite a bit of land in that general area, and opportunities for spreading units throughout the city, as I talked about the fair housing requirements. So instead of looking only at, for example, the Old Town and the Civic Center specific plan areas, we need to look at other places throughout the city in order to meet those state requirements. So just to go over, again, these are areas that we're looking at. We're in the initial stages. We've sort of identified larger areas that we'll take a closer look at, but it did want to, again, remind everyone about the outreach opportunities so that you can help with the planning of where the units are going to be sort of identified. So we really encourage everyone to complete the online survey. There are places where you can put in your own comments. It's not sort of a yes, no, or multiple choice. So that's very helpful to us. We do have a second meeting coming up, another public workshop on March 22nd, and we'll have a better idea and some draft sites to put on our site inventory for the housing element as well. When the draft housing element is prepared, we're projecting that in May, that will be available for public review. And so that will be easily accessible. And there will also be public hearings before Planning Commission and City Council consideration. So here we're highlighting the survey again. We really want to hear from the community, stakeholders, community organizations, and a good way to do that, particularly in this age of COVID right now, is by filling out the survey. And again, the survey does cover both the housing element and the land use element. So it really informs us on 2 of the 4 general plan elements. So we really encourage your participation. There is a survey in English, and there's also one in Spanish as well. And just to touch on the schedule again, so here we are in January, February. We're starting to look at the site inventory. We're also conducting the first workshop. And the site inventory was sort of those areas that we showed you on the map. And then we're going to be drilling down into identifying specific sites. And some, but maybe not all of those general areas would be included on that site inventory. In March, we have our second workshop where we have a better idea of where these sites might be, instead of just a sort of a general idea. In May, we'll have a draft, and we'll have some study sessions, May through July. The draft will also be sent to the Department of Housing and Community Development for their review before we finalize it. And the final will then go to Planning Commission, City Council in September, October. And with that, I'd like to open it up for questions on the housing element.
Hida, if I could just give a little bit more feedback on the site inventory. I just want to make it clear to the audience that if your property is somewhat classified in this site inventory in a income category that you're not planning to build in no way does that mean that the city is dictating that you build a project in that income category. The site inventory will have flexibility, so we will cover that with other development throughout the city. So I just want to make that clear that the site inventory doesn't limit a developer from developing a project outside of that income category.
I see there's a chat question that asks, will the study session be open to the public?
And yes, they will.
Okay, I don't see any other hands raised, I don't think.
Chair Kurth, we received a question through the chat. It's from Carlos Rodriguez. He asked, how does the 8,146 unit allocation of the 6th cycle compare to the total allocation of the current 5th cycle?
So I'll answer that question. It's not vastly different for Victorville. For the Skag region, it was much larger than it had been as a region. But what Skag did is they shifted a number of units more towards the coast and away from sort of the more inland areas, because that is more consistent with Skag's transportation plans of having housing units being clustered more around available transit.
And if I could add, just to put it in comparison with our our current 8-year cycle, it was just over 7,200 units. So we're only adding another 1,000 on the unit count for this next 8-year cycle, where, like Hida said, some of these coastal cities double, triple the amount of housing units they had to plan for from the previous year, from the previous cycle.
And I see there's another question, and I think I'm going to refer to or defer to Scott on this. I think the answer is no to this, but I don't think, did we meet our RENA numbers during this past cycle? And I can sort of take that to start. Most cities in California did not meet their 5th cycle housing numbers. It's a handful that met their numbers because they're usually quite large, and residential development can be controversial. And so it's a rarity when a city can meet their requirements or even exceed them.
I'd like to add a clarifying point to that. So there's this distinction that I think is important to keep in mind, and that is that cities are primarily required to plan for the number of units. And so that means that there's capacity within the zoning code for the certain number of housing units to be developed over the 8-year cycle. And cities are not required to actually build the units. That's something that's left to private developers, including nonprofit affordable housing developers, to do. And so the city of Victorville did adequately plan for the 5th cycle housing element units that they were required to plan for. What he is referring to is that those units weren't actually built. And again, that's through no fault of the city. It's just that market factors and other considerations prevented those units from being built. And primarily that's the case for the affordable housing units. I don't know if Scott, if you wanted to add anything to that, but I just wanted to share that.
No, thank you. You summed it up perfectly.
All right, we received another question from Suzanne, excuse me. Will densities in the current general plan zoning be considered for change, i.e. increased density ranges?
So I'll answer that. We're at the initial stages right now. So I would answer the question with what the state requires. So there's a requirement at the state level that any property for lower income households, meaning we've identified this site is going to be affordable to low income, very low income, extremely low income. There's a requirement that the density be 20 to 30 units per acre. And so that comes from the state. It's the state's belief that affordable housing cannot be accomplished unless there is sufficient density due to land costs and other factors. So we will have to adhere to that requirement. We're just embarking on the process to determine where those densities, what the existing densities are in the city, and how many sites will qualify for our site inventory, and if there's going to be a need to do any rezoning. And if there is, that would be part of the land use element update process. So I would say stay tuned for that, as we're currently in the process of determining it, where and if that is required.
And I would like to add, if you are a property owner, or if you're just a general public that would like to see increased density somewhere, or have just a density comment, you can email us or email Hida and Dima at their email addresses to let your voices be heard, so we can understand that when we're looking at site inventories and potential density increases.
All right, we have another question. Valentine Godina would like to know if some areas will be exempt from the housing target.
I want to be careful about the way I answer the question, because I don't want to make it sound like, only those state sort of designated open space areas, but those are definitely exempt. I think what I would say about Victorville is there is a large amount of vacant property in Victorville, as opposed to other cities in California that are more built out. So I don't know that it's going to be the same kind of challenge in Victorville as it would in a higher density, sort of where there isn't any vacant land kind of city. I can't answer that specifically, except to say that high fire areas, for example, it's not good practice, and the state doesn't want to see areas where there might be flooding, fires, areas set aside for agriculture, state exempt open space. Those are the type of properties that I can say with 100% confidence would be exempt.
All right, another question from Linda is there planning for specific senior housing?
So in the housing element, when we look at existing housing needs, we look at special groups, and this is statewide. It's a state requirement, and seniors are a group that we look at. So we will be evaluating the need for senior housing, and that will be part of the housing element. So any input that you all have on sort of the needs for senior housing locations that are a good match for senior housing, we really welcome that information.
I just had one question going back to the RENA numbers. I'm not all that familiar with it, but over the years I've seen more and more talk of this, and I noticed those RENA numbers have been changing over the last couple of years. Like you had mentioned, they backed off, and a lot of them went to the coastal communities earmarked for that area. Do we expect these changes to continue? And also, the other part of the question is, would they continue knowing that California's population is not growing as much as it has in the past? And I've seen a lot of reports with, people moving out of state, and the growth has really backed off. Will those affect our numbers during this process, or shortly after, do you think?
It wouldn't affect this cycle, and I acknowledge what you're saying. I've read the same things about outmigration. These numbers are pretty set in stone for the next 8 years. So when you do your next housing element update in 2029, that's when there might be some change as a result of that. But in terms of the long-term planning for the SCAG region, SCAG's planning documents call for more housing clustered in urban coastal areas where there is access to a lot of transit, high frequency transit, and employment centers to reduce greenhouse gases from commuting, and also quality of life for people. It remains to be seen, I think, if more people are going to be working remotely. I think the next 8-year cycle may have some changes as a result of maybe less of a reason to commute for many people.
Right. Okay, thank you. It looks like we have a couple of more questions here. Carlos Rodriguez asked, the current RENA allocation mentioned by staff was 7,200. Please advise on the total number of units built during the current RENA cycle.
I'm going to defer to Scott on this one.
So there was a lot.
Sorry,
yes,
Scott.
so there was a there's a lot of factors that came into play here, coming out of the Great Recession, also the dissolvement of redevelopment, which had a large chunk of money set aside for affordable housing. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it's less than 2,000 units that we've built so far within the last 8 years.
Okay. And then there was a question from Regis Berardo, and this kind of goes in line with what you were saying, Scott, about property owners aren't going to be forced to build a certain product type. And Regis asks, will there be any incentives to developers to build low income or senior housing?
So, I mean, I want to answer the question in the order that it would happen, that things would happen. So as we go through and we develop that list of sites that I went through on the presentation, we have to identify, like I said, the number of units and the income levels for those units. The housing element will identify funding sources for affordable housing. Affordable housing does require a public subsidy because it costs more to build it than the revenue that is generated by it. And that's why it's been a challenge, and that's why we don't have enough of it. So we will identify funding sources that can be used to fill the gap in terms of what it costs to build versus the revenue. And there are multiple funding sources for that, like low-income housing tax credits and state grants have kind of replaced sort of some of the redevelopment money that we saw in the 90s and the early 2000s. The incentives are financial incentives are going to be mostly focused on state and federal funding sources. With the dissolution of redevelopment in 2012, local government doesn't have the revenue generating tools anymore without redevelopment to offer those direct incentives for the most part. So I would categorize that under the challenges of building affordable housing. Building affordable housing used to be redevelopment agencies could fund directly. Local city government could fund it directly. When the state dissolved redevelopment and the flow of funds stopped, it's more like putting a jigsaw puzzle piece together. You take a little bit from tax credits, you take a little bit from state grants, you take a little bit of home funds. It's a little bit more of a complicated process. So I would say that there will be some incentives, but they're going to be pieces that will need to be assembled in order to make it work.
Yes, Hita, and I can add a little bit to the incentives because as part of this whole process, we want to get the development community's feedback, especially when it comes to multifamily projects. If property owners, developers have identified impediments within our current zoning code that doesn't allow them to build what they want and which would which would in turn achieve the arena if they were allowed to build it. We want to know what those impediments are, so we can look at possible changes to our zoning code to relieve some of those impediments, make them incentives, so we can build some of these projects. So again, HEDA will flash the contact information again at the end of this presentation. So feel free to please reach out to us, voice your opinions, even if you have something that's just general or specific, please give us your thoughts so we can factor that in as we develop these plans.
I'll put the contact information up now, the last slide, just so everyone can see.
I would like to add that the housing element that we're addressing first directly relates to the land use element that we'll be preparing. So if we're looking at higher densities in our housing product, that'll be related in an update in our land use update. And again, HEDA, our first land use element workshop is scheduled for the 24th of this month. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Another thing I'd like to point out on our city website there at the bottom of the screen, you can sign up for our mailers. So if you didn't get a notice through email in this last, for this meeting, please visit that website, put in your email address so we can notify you of future workshops. But we do have this next scheduled workshop for the 24th of this month.
We also, I just wanted to add, we'll also be engaging with the developer community to understand, development feasibility, taking a look at sites, because the development community is a partner in this process, as well as Scott had mentioned. I think that when you're going to identify sites, having a certain type of housing and then, a specific income level that it needs to be affordable for, having, some conversations and some input from those property owners is pretty important. So that's part of this process as well. We want to engage with property owners so that we can effectively plan for all of the units in the distribution of different income levels and affordability that the state is requiring.
Yeah, so I think it really is, like you kind of explained, it's threefold. It's the community involvement, which once again, we urge everyone who's listening or can get other folks to head over towards that survey page, because, this are our voices. We are Victorville. So this is the beginning of this update. The second thing is working with the property owners. That's where we'll be talking about zoning in the next element. And also very importantly is a lot of these developers, because without them, things don't come out of the ground. So I think that's a good position to take.
If I could make a comment, everybody seems to be addressing low-income housing. This city is full of low-income housing. If we have to concentrate on taking care of everybody, we don't have any high-income housing in our city. So I'm not sure what incentivizing anything other than what we would need the most. So I would like to throw that in there. This region is made on low-income housing. That's almost why everybody comes up here.
Thank you for your comment, Commissioner Harriman. And yes, as HEDA mentioned in her slideshow, the vast majority of the arena units are in that above moderate group. And that's actually based off the state standard, what the city's been building in the past 8 years. We haven't had a lot of multifamily to meet that income bracket. So we're looking with this housing update to encourage all forms of housing in every income bracket. But that is an income bracket, that above moderate range that we do need to address and make sure that we're building that for future residents.
And I think, and I just wanted to add, Scott, that I think, engaging with the developer, the development community will be important to understand, to get their insights on what will make the development of all of these types of housing units desirable for developers.
It looks like we have a question from Carlos Rodriguez. Carlos, are you there? Or maybe, or if you don't have a question, that's okay.
I think he's on mute.
Yeah. Carlos, we can't. Oh, there you go.
I don't know if this is the appropriate time. I can hold my question till the end. I just wanted to make sure that I made it known that I'd like to make a public comment when appropriate.
Yeah, if it's a comment on this house, on this item and the general plan update, now would be the time. Go ahead.
I just muted myself again. It's one of the functions my wife really likes. So Happy New Year, Chairman Kurth and members of the Planning Commission. Wanted to start off by recognizing the remarkable career on the commission by Commissioner Huber, and congratulations to all the commissioners and to the new council members for their upcoming service. Just wanted to thank you for this opportunity to have a discussion about housing in Victorville. There was a young man in the early 2000s that was trying to find his first home and to try to have that American dream of home ownership, and found his way to Victorville back in 2003. That person's not so young anymore, and Carlos Rodriguez, but I look fondly back at my home ownership and living in Victorville, the great city, for 5 years, and wanted to just highlight for those 65% in the RENA category that are looking to become homeowners and to really work towards ending the cycle of intergenerational poverty that stops once one becomes a homeowner. We believe at the Building Industry Association of Southern California that we need all types of housing at all socioeconomic levels in order to make that dream become a reality. So while my comments may focus on the 65% of market rate housing that the SCAG and the state are challenging the city of Victorville, I hope not to just plan for, but to strive to see come to market. But we also have an eye on that other 35%, and we view that as certainly important, and want to roll up our sleeves as an industry, as landowners, developers, home builders, trades that are part of our association, to work with you on the Planning Commission, the City Council, and your great staff, as we've done in my 17 years in the past and working at the BIA. We view these new RENA numbers as a challenge, but we still, while they're maybe daunting when you look at through the lens of saying, well, we had 7,200 units in the current cycle, it's only going up 900, but as was mentioned, less than 2,000 were built. And we are coming off of, prior to the pandemic, a season of economic prosperity where, generally speaking, the economy was strong. We had unemployment low, and yet still, while every city is different and Victorville is not immune to the different market dynamics, still the numbers, taking into account the pandemic, were well below the RENA allocation. So with that said, and again, Victorville is not immune to that. Generally speaking, all cities are falling short of that. It's just a matter of, can we work together to not only plan for the locations and the zoning and getting the public input, but also what can we do to ensure that we can build more and bring more homes to market, and have that opportunity for all socioeconomic levels to work toward that opportunity to own a home. And also what comes with home ownership and also what comes with new development is jobs and economic growth, which will also be a benefit to the city of Victorville. So I'll just, don't have really a lot of technical questions per se. I just wanted to express our enthusiasm as an industry to continue to work with the Planning Commission, staff, and the City Council to ensure that we can also work towards some of the challenges we see across our country, across our state, across our region. No city is immune to it, but we look at a recent pattern of home ownership and generational wealth building amongst minorities. And according to the Census Bureau, this is their data, 44% of minority families owned a home, 74% of white families owned a home. So there's something that needs to be done. I think what we can look at is how do we bridge that divide? Is the lack of home ownership and the housing crisis that is in our county and in the high desert and in our state. That's why the numbers went up from 400,000 to 1.3 million, because of the pent up demand and the lack of production that we've been seeing. So that is all just to say that this is such a significant process that you're undergoing. But at the same time, planning and policies are also intertwined. And I would just say that, again, in the spirit of wanting to have as greater opportunity for social equity as possible, that we work towards providing housing at a rate of supply that keeps the price points at a level where if you're renting, you don't have to have 30% of your income go to rent, so that you can put money away for a down payment. And if you're putting away for the down payment, you're not seeing the prices continue to go up because of regulatory barriers, because of policy levers that are within the reach of those that are on this call today and the City Council. So there are, I did hear a comment, I think Mr. Galkin talked about some of the market dynamics and as to kind of speaking to the production or lack thereof. We would also say that as an industry that there are significant policies in every city that are available to ensure that housing production continues to increase at a brisk pace, and that we can do better than less than 2,000 units, and that we can get closer to over 8,000 units in the next cycle. And that, while there are market dynamics that are out of the control of policymakers and commissioners, we would say that that the opportunity to meet with you and discuss those policies, not when we have this RENA process, but on a parallel track, we can be talking about those, because this cycle's not quite done yet, and we could still start making momentum happen now that will carry into the next cycle. So again, we're ready to roll up our sleeves. We're very enthusiastic about Victorville market and the opportunity here. There is an undersupply. If you talk to the Realtor Association, they'll vouch for the lack of available homes on the market. We believe this is a great market. And we just also believe, while we're wanting to be engaged in this process, we would urge workshops in the very near future to talk about opportunities on the design side of the ledger, on how we're approaching development in 2021, and see if we can make some reforms now that will get us the ability to bring more product in abundance to Victorville and make the home ownership opportunity more abundant for all ethnicities and all income levels. I appreciate the opportunity to work with you, and thanks for letting me comment today. God bless.
Thank you. You're welcome. Are there any, I don't see any other comments. Does anybody else see any?
There's one more. Suzanne asks, can property owners participate in the CAC meetings?
Yes. Yes. Are you talking I think that Suzanne is referring to the environmental justice element, CAC, the Citizens Advisory Council, or Community Advisory Council, excuse me. And yes, those meetings will be open to the public. So any property owners, you know, community organizations, any resident, renters, anyone anyone and all are invited to participate.
Okay, then with that, are there any follow-up questions by planning commissioners for the consultants or for city staff?
I'm not showing any more comments in the chat, and no one has their hand raised.
It looked like Paul was talking.
Yeah, I had my mute button on. I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I just had it's just a question I have as far as the percentages. You know, when we're talking about now, as far as the percentage of multi-unit, multifamily units versus single family residences, is there a certain percentage, or is it just depending on where the project's located? So basically what I'm asking is, as far as apartment complexes versus single family residences, is there a certain percentage of the city, I mean, that's taken into consideration that we'll have this many apartment complexes, so there's not more apartments than single family residences being built? I don't know if that makes sense or not, but
I think it does. I mean, I can answer the question, and I would go back to one of the slides that we were looking at. My cursor seems to be disappearing here. Trying to get, hold on. So, and I'm just taking it back to the state requirements here. So we talked about the the low income and the extremely and very low income categories. So out of your 8,146 units that have been allocated to you essentially by the state, about 2,800, a little more than 2,800 of those units need to be affordable. You need to plan for them to be affordable, not build them, but plan for what is referred to as lower income households. So it's low income and below. The state requires that the sites that are identified for these 2,800 units have a density of 20 to 30 units an acre. So essentially the state is requiring that these units for low income and below have to be multifamily. They have to have a multifamily zoning with a certain density. So that's the best way I could answer your question now at these early stages that we're at in the process, is that somehow we have to identify sites at that density 20 to 30 units an acre for 2,800 units as part of your housing element requirements. Is that?
And I'd like to add, so people understand this, the site inventory that we're putting together is not going to address sites that are not feasible for construction in the next 8 years. The site inventory is going to be based off of available infrastructure. We're looking at sites that are most easily developable within this next 8-year cycle. So if we have some multifamily zoning that's on the west side of the city where there's no availability to sewer currently, that's probably not going to be on our list of sites that we're identifying. So while we do have, you know, roughly 74 square miles in the city, there's a large area that's zoned for multifamily projects that haven't been built yet. And there's a large area for single family homes that haven't been built yet. The private sector really dictates when those areas get built out based on market conditions. We are focusing more on the core area where there's already infrastructure to create these lists of available sites to meet our RENA numbers over the next 8 years.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the commission? Okay, seeing no one, I think that should wrap it up for tonight on that presentation. I want to thank Hida and Dima and the Harrison Associates and city staff for the work that's been put in so far, and thank you for the concise explanations. And we'll be looking forward to the next upcoming meetings. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
So next up, we have general public comments from citizens who may want to ask questions or make comments to the commission based on anything within the Planning Commission's subject matter jurisdiction as according to the Brown Act. Do we see anyone here that has a hand raised or wants to make a comment to the commission? Do you see anyone, Melissa?
Chair Kurth, I do not have anyone raising their hand to speak, and I did not receive any public comment.
Okay, thank you. With that, the final thing will be presentation of reports by commission members and staff. We'll start with Commissioner Wells. Anything to report?
Hi. No, nothing to report at this time. Thank you.
Okay. And Commissioner Harriman.
Yeah, I have one comment. The new car dealership that went into the old Target building, the landscaping there, it looks terrible still. And the car wash was just built down the street in the same time period, and the landscaping there is beautiful. And that's supposed to be the Palmdale Road, I believe, has its own corridor of landscape guidelines, and that project is not matching those. In fact, anything they've planted is dead, and they look like they've opened for business. And I would like the city to address that to them, because I just find that not acceptable. Especially that area needs help, and when somebody builds like they have done, they need to uplift the area, and that's not doing it. Planting dead landscape is just not doing it. Thank you.
Any questions from Commissioner, or any comments from Commissioner Cook Askins Jr.?
I have no comments other than it's a great privilege to be appointed by the council to be on the Planning Commission, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you and our great service to our city. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And I have nothing tonight. Is there any final comments from staff members?
Thank you, Chairman Kurth, fellow commissioners. I'd just like to point out, Commissioner Harriman brought up a project that was unfortunately developed during a time where some of these plants go dormant. Just to give some insight, staff, in response to the developer's request to help them gain occupancy, we were able to put a bond in place. So we do have some leverage within the next 6 months to reinspect to make sure that these plants are still alive. But we try to do our best with what we were dealing with an existing site to try to bring it up to code. But you will be seeing some additional improvements over the next 6 months before that bond is released back to the developer.
You still have responsibilities over there.
Yeah.
So you're doing both? Wow.
Okay, hey, Scott, do we adjourn this meeting to the next regular meeting? Is that how this works for special meetings?
Yes, you can adjourn it to the February 10th regular meeting.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody, and we will adjourn to that February 10th regular meeting. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Good night.